Hello there. Welcome to our lesson on modeling number quantities. This is a lesson for Basic 7. Modeling in mathematics is a way that we represent real-life phenomena using mathematical ideas and concepts. We'll be using the multi-base block model, which focuses on the cube, the rod, the flat, and the block to model numbers. We'll also use the graph sheet, which also uses the same idea as the multi-base block. Then we'll move on to the multiples. That is, we'll use multiples of numbers to also model bigger number quantities. Then we'll also look at the token currency. That will also use the same principles that we'll be using at the multiples to also model number quantities. At the end of the lesson, it is expected that the student is able to model number quantities using multi-base block. The student should also be able to model number quantities using the graph sheet. You should also be able to model number quantities using multiples of numbers. And also, you should also be able to model number quantities using token notes or token currency. As said early on, multi-base block, we will establish the relationship between the four components of the multi-base block. These components are the cube, the rod, the flat, and the block. The graph sheet will use the same concept from the multi-base block. That is, we will represent one square unit. We'll give one square unit the same value that we gave to the cube when we're dealing with the multi-base block. And then finally, we'll look at multiples and token currency notes. They have the same concept, so we'll look at them separately, but then we'll be using the same concept to model number quantities using these models. Modeling is very important in mathematics because mathematics is full of using concepts and ideas. The, the numbers, the variables, they are all representation of some particular values. So knowing how to model numbers will help you to be good at mathematics. Also, for instance, in our markets, the prices of items or services are based on some particular model. So to be able to do well at pricing or at selling anything, you have to know how to use a particular model. For instance, if you are selling maybe fish or bread, the fish at a point won't have any value unless you put a value on it. So if you are selling a number of them, then you would be able to know how to price each of them. So modeling is very important. And as you are learning, you can also research on some of the skills that you gain from learning to model number quantities. Right, so let's look at the first model that we'll be using. That is the multi-base block model. The multi-base block model, as mentioned early on, uses four main components. That is the cube, the rod, the flat, and the block. These are the four main components that we normally use to build using the multi-base block model. The starting point is 1 cube. That is the unit. So when I have 10 of the cubes, then I can say that I can arrange them. I can even stack them on top of each other to get a rod. So you can see in the diagram, 10 cubes will make one rod. And if I have 10 of the rods and I put each beside each other, then I'll get a flat. And then 10 flats will give us also one block. Now let's look at the components separately. The first one is the cube. And as mentioned earlier on, the cube is the first component. If we are considering this as building, the cube will be looked at as if it is a brick. It is out of this cube that we can build each of the other components. So if I have one cube and I put one on top of each other, then I get 10 of them, then I say I have a rod. So it is the first component. We will usually initialize the cube with a particular value. So if I say that one cube is, let's say, 1000, then when I have 10 of the cubes, then it means I have to multiply the value of the cube by 10. So this is our first component. We will initialize it with a particular value always before we model or we build the other components. So as said, an example is if I have one cube being equal to 100,000 and I have 5 cubes. One cube is 100,000. So if I have 5 cubes, it means that I have to multiply the value of the cube by 5. So one cube being 100,000, it means I have 5 times 100,000. And 5 times 100,000 is 500,000, as seen in the option A. That is, one cube was 100,000. So if one cube is 100,000 and I have 5 cubes, it means I have to multiply the value of the cube by 5. So that means that 5 cubes equals 5 times 100,000, or 5 times the value of one cube. And that will give us 500,000. The next component of the multi-base block is called the rod. The rod can be built using 10 cubes. If I have 10 cubes and I put them on top of each other, or I put them beside each other, then it means I have formed a rod. It also implies that if we give any value to a cube, then the value of the rod will be 10 times the value of the cube. As seen in the box for the formula, one rod is 10 times one cube. So if we give a cube the value of, let's say, 700, then it means the value of a rod, or the value of one rod, is going to be 10 times 700, which will be 7,000. Alright, so let's look at an example. If one cube is 100,000, we have 4 rods here. 1 cube is 100,000. So first we have to know the value of 1 rod. We know that 1 rod is equivalent to 10 cubes. So if 1 cube is 100,000, then 1 rod is going to be 10 times 100,000. And 10 times 100,000 is going to be 1 million. It means that the value of 1 rod is 1 million. And we see 4 rods here. So it means we have to multiply the 1 million by 4 to get 4 million, which is the answer for the option B. You can also think of it this way. If 1 rod equals 10 cubes, then it means 4 rods is going to be 10 times 4. 1 rod is 10 cubes. So if we want to know the number of cubes that we will use to model, were used to model this 4 rods, it means we have to multiply 4 by 10 to get 40. So it means we used 40 cubes to model this 4 rods. And if 1 cube equals 100,000, then it means 40 cubes will be 100,000 times 40. And 100,000 times 40 will give us 4 million. So as seen, 1 cube is 100,000. But we know that 1 rod is the same as 10 times 1 cube. So if we are doing substitution, we are just representing 1 cube with 100,000. So it implies that one rod is equal to 10 times 100,000. And 10 times 100,000 is 1 million. So if we have 4 of the rods, it means we have to multiply the value of the rod by 4 so that we can say that 4 rods will be equal to 4 million. But let's look at the next component in our multi-base block model, which is the flat. And a flat is made up of 10 rods or 100 cubes, as seen in the diagram there. It means that when we know the value of the rod, to get the value of a flat, we have to multiply the value of the rod by 10. Similarly, if we know the value of a cube, since the rod is 10 of the cubes, it means if we want to know the value of the flat, we have to multiply the value of the cube by 100. That is, 1 flat is the same as 100 cubes. So if we know the value of a cube and we want the value of a flat, we have to multiply the value of the cube by 100. As seen in the box for the formulas, 1 flat is the same as 10 times 1 rod, but 1 rod is the same as 10 cubes. So if we want a flat, it means the flat is the same as 10 times 10 cubes. That is 100 cubes. So let's see in this example, if a cube is 100,000, what is the value of a flat? 1 cube is 100,000. We have just established from the formulas that 1 flat is the same as 100 cubes. So if 1 cube is 100,000, then it means you have to multiply 100,000 by 100, which is the same as 10 million, as seen in option B. The next component, the last component in our multi-base block system, is the block. and the block is made up of 10 flats. Since the 10 rods make one flat, it means if you want the value of the block using the value of a rod, we have to multiply it by 100. That is, one block is the same as 100 rods. And also, if the cube, we know the value of the cube and we want to know the value of a block, we would have to multiply the value of the cube by 1000 to get the value of the block. That is why we said that the cube is the most important, because it is out of that we are able to build each of the components. So an example, if a cube is 100,000, what is the value of a block? We have just learned that 1000 cubes will give one block. So if one cube is 100,000 and we want a block, it means we have to multiply 100,000 by 1000, and that will give us 100 million. Alright, so in the lesson we have learned about modeling. We said that modeling involves using mathematical concepts and ideas to represent real life phenomenon. We learned about the cube, which is the first component or the unit when we are building using the multi-base block model. We also discussed the rod. We said that the rod is 10 times the cube. So if we have a cube, then it means the value of a cube multiplied by 10 will give us one rod. And if I know the value of a rod and I want the value of a flat, I have to also multiply it by 10. And the flat can also be equal to 100 times the value of a cube. And finally, when we have a block, the block is 10 times the value of a flat, or 100 times the value of a rod, or 1000 times the value of a cube. Learn how to relate these four components. The most important thing about this lesson is that for you to know the relationship between the four components. So for instance, 10 cubes will give you one rod, 100 cubes will give you one flat, 1000 cubes will give you one block, 10 rods will give you one flat. That means 100 rods will give you one block, and then 10 flats will give you one block. Know the relationship between these four components so that you'll be able to get the value of one when you know the value of the other. But if you have any questions or suggestions, you can send them to the email shown down here. And also, if you want to learn more about the multi-base block, you can get our book, Let's Learn Mathematics Basics 7. And then you can also go to our website. We have a lot of questions and answers at our website. Then our YouTube channel also has a lot of videos that we've created on multi-base block. That is questions and answers that will normally come in multi-base block. All right. Thank you very much.